Hello, and welcome to AJ Paints. I'm Andy. In this episode, we're going to look at another adversary from Maladum, the board game by Battle Systems. The Hellfont is an amalgamation of human corpses with a plasma tank on its back, allowing it to breathe fire onto your hapless adventurers. In this paint job, I want to move away from the browns, greys and yellows present in the original artwork, so I'm using Photoshop here to boost the saturation of that artwork so I can pick out some more interesting colours. Looking here at the head, I can see purples and pinks, and in the skin even some greens. I'm going to use these as my base tones. Starting off then with these great base tones, dark hot pink and night blue. I'm going to blend these together all over the miniature, starting with my black primer coat, with the dark hot pink at the top and the blue at the bottom. Looking at the skin tones on this monster, I can see yellows, greens, blues, fading up to a real pale flesh tone. So those are the colours I'm going to select to work from. You can see here my starting point for the yellowy browny colours, and this purpley red and a lavender colour for the other tones. For this job I'll be using my wet palette, and you can see I've set up all my colours here. Already on the right hand side, the dark hot pink and the blue blended for the base coat. My basic process for all of these areas of skin is pretty much the same throughout the miniature. I'm starting here with the heavy gold brown, that's my darker tone. I'm going on very thin with this, and you can see that purpley bluey base coats coming through. I tend to like to brush my highlights up towards the top, just as the light's catching the top of it, and you can see here going in with a slightly lighter version of that colour. It's the same here, although this time I'm using more lavender colour. There's a tiny bit of that hot pink mixed in just to make sure I'm blending in with the base coat, and I've got a tiny bit of blue mixed in there as well. You can see that that light colour really helps to pick out the highlight on the top of the shoulder there. I'm using small, short, dotted strokes because I don't really want to slap that paint on. I need to be able to make sure I'm blending it in nicely. Coming in here with some blue mixed in, just to give some shadows at the bottom. Same again, short, small strokes, so I'm overpowering the colour. Back in with a mixture, this time using some of the flayed one flesh and the lighter flesh colours just to come into the top and build it up. Again, tapping, small strokes, just focusing on the top this time of that section. Another really important part of this miniature is adding texture. On the original artwork the skin's quite mottled, and you can see here that I'm not painting directly a solid highlight. I'm really tapping and just putting small marks onto the skin. These will dry out, go a little bit darker, and I can build up on those. But if you see on this next section, I'm painting something that's just not there. I'm starting off with a pink colour, and you can see that the way I'm putting the strokes on, I'm trying to give some striations, some vertical lines onto this muscly end of the tendril. Eventually I'm going to start building this up with some lighter areas. It almost looks a bit like an earthworm. Here with the pale flesh tone mixed in, I can start to draw on the lines which give me the separations that make it look like bits of muscle controlling this little end of the tentacle. With the paint being really thin, I can go back and forth several times, slowly building up that colour until I get the highlight that I want. Although I'm painting over the base coat, I'm trying to use the blue and the pink as a reference to help me to get those colours looking really nice. So I've mixed in a little bit of that blue with some of the lavender colour just to pick out highlights underneath, although this is a shadowy area, so I'm not aiming for anything too bright. And that's the basic colours blocked out for all of those areas of the skin. I've alternated between blues, the yellowy browns and green colours. It's time to focus on the mouth, and I'm going to begin with those incredibly sharp and pointy teeth. We'll start with a base coat of the heavy gold brown, leaving some gaps in between the teeth as I paint. While I've got the heavy gold brown on my brush, I'm also picking out all the stitching throughout the miniature. These sections behind the jaw just need filling in with some dark paint. I'm using Rhinox hide from Citadel here. Staying with that dark brown Rhinox hide, but much more watered down, I'm using it as a wash now to pick out the details around the teeth. While that thinned down paint is drying, I'm taking an opportunity to pick up some base coats that I've not done yet. That's the plasma tank and the pipe connecting it to the Hellfont's head. Back to the mouth now, and I'll work on the tongue. So this is various layers, starting with a darkish pink paint, gradually adding little bits of red to boost the, well, obviously the red colour of the tongue, and eventually highlighting up to a flesh colour. You can see here just very slowly adding a little bit more each time, and the paint is very slightly lighter each time. Here's the final highlight to make that tongue look really shiny and wet. I've also done similar things on the gums at the top. And here's how it looks on the palette. As we focus in here, you can see that I've got red, I've got that dark hot pink, and a nice sort of sunny skin tone colour that I'm using as my highlight. Back to the teeth, and it's just a case of adding more and more light ivory coloured paint in and painting smaller and smaller highlights, as you can see here. The final highlight should be concentrated right on the tip of the tooth, and that just makes it look really sharp. While I was pausing and checking my miniature over, I realised that I had left some really bad mould lines on there, so I had to go back in and do a bit of fixing. Don't be afraid to go back in if you need to do something serious like this. You can see I'm scraping away all the base coat stuff that I've put on to make sure that I get that mould line cleared, but it didn't take long to get some more base coat back on that, and it looked good. Moving up to the top of the miniature now with the plasma tank and all the skin holding it together. There's a lot of pink in there, there's some purple in there as well, but it did seem very dark. So I started to build up layers just to see how it looked, beginning with that dark hot pink mixed with a little bit of a lighter tone to see how it came out. And eventually I just built up more and more of the lighter tones, and I realised I was heading towards a flesh colour for the top. So that's what I went for. You can see here, it's exactly the same as all of the other sections really. I'm just working very small brush strokes, slightly lighter paint each time, bringing it up, just focusing towards the top where I want that brightest highlight to be. By the time I'm finished, I'm pretty much on a pure pale skin tone here, but only going right at the top. I want to keep all the lovely purple colours and the blues that I've got in there in that original. Sticking with a similar colour actually, I'm highlighting now all of the bone sections. They've had the same treatment as the teeth, so they've had that base colour and then a wash on, and just working towards the points now with the brightest highlight to make sure they look really pointy. The the plasma tank on the back of the miniature looks fantastic on the original painted minis, and I've picked two of my brightest green and yellow paints here to start work. So going in with the green, this isn't the bright green straight from the pot, that's mixed with a little bit of darker green, and I'm going in just to give myself a base coat. I'm painting this, not putting any dots or bubble patterns on yet, just giving myself something to work from. Slightly lighter green paint now, and I'm beginning to add the texture by tapping to make the bubble pattern. And here's what it looks like on my palette. It means I can go back and forth, pick up any shade of green that I want, and that'll help me to get the effect that I need. So lighter down towards the back here, lighter around the where the fangs, the rib bits are sticking up, and then spaced out really the bits there as I get towards the top. You can see I left a dark section there originally. I was going to paint like a water line on there, but I filled that in fairly quickly, didn't like the look of that, and just went back over tapping again. You need a light touch to do this, you need a sharp brush, but most of all, don't overdo it. Make sure that you're spreading these things out and keep going back. You can always add more, it's difficult to take them away though. When I'm painting in this style, a key thing that I like to do is try to get as much contrast as I can between the highlights and the shadows. So that often means going back into pieces that I've painted already and adding extra. You can see here light bits of dots just to pick out the warts and the lumps on the skin previously, those muscle groups on the worm tail. Finding extra little bits, in this case it's the stitching, making sure that the stitching really stands out and it's really bright. Because it's a tabletop miniature, it needs to look good from far away, so it's so important that you have those bright brights and the dark darks. This metal pipe is dark sea blue for the base, and then gradually fading up to something like pale sand, a pale ivory colour, with tiny dots for the brightest highlights. It's not quite non-metallic metal, but it gives you that sort of effect. And as always with my Maladum miniatures, just a really plain base, P3 iron hull grey. If you want to rebase yours, you can cut them off fairly easily using a craft knife, stick them onto a clear base or some fantastic sculpted scenery bases, make your own, buy one. I'm sure you'll be able to do something fantastically creative. And there we have it, another finished miniature. A little bit of satin varnish on the tongue to make it shiny, and it's done. This one took around about 3 hours to finish. I'm really happy with it, I think it looks good. If you'd like to see a quicker version, then check out another video on my channel where I speed paint one using contrast paints. Anyway, if you've got this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.